So we are back with another video. This time we're going to be looking at Bethesda and E3. A few days ago, they did actually release their E3 trailer announcing that they will be having their own E3 presentation, as they have had the past couple of years. But even beyond that, they're actually telling us the date. That's going to be June 10th, 2018 at 6:30 p.m. Pacific time. Similar to what they did last year, this is going to be on the Sunday before E3 starts, so E3 typically is going to be starting on that Monday. I will personally be doing a live stream over this, actually looking at some of the stuff they do announce and kind of just giving a commentary on it like I did last year. So if you want to subscribe, you can check that out when it does come. It's a few months away now, but either way, before we start out this video and actually dive into my predictions and what you should be expecting from Bethesda at E3, we should make one pretty important distinction. Bethesda's E3 event is going to be hosted by Bethesda Softworks. That's different than Bethesda Game Studios. Bethesda Softworks is a game developer that actually produced things like Prey, Doom, Wolfenstein, in addition to the Elder Scrolls and Fallout series. Bethesda Game Studios is actually a subsidiary of Bethesda Softworks. Bethesda Game Studios is specifically the game studio that produced the Fallout games as well as the Elder Scrolls game. Bethesda Game Studios, or BGS, is the company I primarily focus on this channel, although we're going to be looking at the event as a whole for the purposes of this video. Although throughout it, I will try and be clear as to which I'm talking about, whether it be Bethesda Softworks or Bethesda Game Studios. As I did mention, they did release this kind of E3 announcement trailer on their Twitter. It really doesn't indicate much about the event. It's showing some of their previous IPs and games that they have created. With that being said though, there's a few predictions that we can make pretty safely about this E3 conference. Many of Bethesda's E3 conferences are pretty kind of scheduled, I guess is the right word. There's been without a doubt a theme in the way they handle these conferences, so we could pretty much get some things out there that we know for sure will appear. The way I'm going to structure this video is I'm going to go over the smaller stuff first, and at the end we're going to get into that spicy new things like Fallout 5, Fallout New Orleans, and of course the Elder Scrolls 6. So starting things off, one thing to really look out for at this E3 is whether or not Bethesda learned from their previous E3 experience. E3 2017, or their E3 2017 conference, was quite bad. A lot of people, myself included, were pretty disappointed by it. And the reason for this was there was no super big reveal. A lot of people were hoping for something new from Bethesda Game Studios, and we actually got that with Creation Club, but, you know, obviously not everyone was super excited about the announcement of Creation Club. Other than that, we also did see the announcement of a few other games, such as Quake Champions, the Wolfenstein 2, the Evil Within 2, and Prey. And in addition to those games, we also do know about the Elder Scrolls Legends and the Elder Scrolls Online. Those are the two kind of other active IPs Bethesda has going for them. The reason I'm talking about all of this is the way Bethesda kind of does E3 is 1 year they'll announce a bunch of new games like Prey, Wolfenstein 2, the Evil Within 2. The following E3 they'll probably or typically announce a lot of expansions or DLCs for those games. This is something they've done time and time again with their previous E3s, and it's only safe to assume it's going to be happening this time. So I think it's highly likely that Wolfenstein 2 and or The Evil Within 2 will get a DLC announcement. They've had some rumblings about this and some release stuff in the past, but especially Wolfenstein was very well selling and very highly critically acclaimed, so most likely we're going to see some more content for that game. In the case of Prey, it's almost definitive that we're going to get some new content for this because there's been some teases on their Twitter account. Obviously, this tweet is open to interpretation, but a lot of people think it might be indicating a DLC that does take place on the moon. In addition, as far as the Elder Scrolls Legends go, they actually have a card game. I think we're going to see some expansion packs for that. It's another one of those active IPs that just really seems ripe for some new content, as well as the card game things like a fad that's been going on, and I imagine they'll announce something new coming to this in the next 6 to 8 months. And then finally, the last one that will be hopefully fairly big is another expansion to the Elder Scrolls Online. Although a lot of people don't really like it, myself included, this definitely has been producing a lot of money for ZeniMax, who's the parent company of both the Bethesda studios. And it seems like they're going to continue to produce content for this, and we'll see more news about this at E3 because, well, it just makes a lot of financial sense. Plus, you know, it's an MMO. The way they make a lot of their money is through these expansion packs. The reason I kind of brought up before as to whether or not Bethesda is going to have learned from their previous E3s is, at 2017's E3, a large part of that was actually these kind of additional content things. Games like Prey and Wolfenstein that people were definitely excited to see but weren't super hyped for. They spent a lot of time on the smaller add-on packs for their existing games and even some of these new IPs that were lesser known. And for that reason, a lot of people were super disappointed, and a lot of people left Bethesda's E3 in 2017 very unhappy. If they listen to that this time around, hopefully they'll have something bigger to show us, and I kind of think they will. Another super common theme at Bethesda's 2017 E3 conference was new VR titles. Currently, Bethesda has Doom VFR, Fallout 4 VR, and Skyrim VR. I imagine there's going to be another release in this spectrum, whether that be Wolfenstein VR or Prey VR, who knows. But it's definitely going to be pretty trendy to release this, and maybe we'll even see a PC release of Skyrim VR. I think that could be fairly likely. Very similar to the VR titles, Switch ports are another thing that Bethesda was doing really well with. We've seen Doom and Skyrim make their way over to the Switch in the past year, and it definitely seems like something we'll see more of at this current E3. Whether that be some of their other games, as I kind of mentioned before, or in fact, I think what might be quite likely is Fallout 4 on the Switch. If Skyrim made its way over, it's very likely Fallout 4 will also, and that was actually something that got leaked quite a while ago, is Fallout 4 Game of the Year Edition for the Nintendo Switch, and we haven't heard much about that ever since. Alright, so with all that out of the way, let's actually get into some of the more interesting or spicy things, and probably the games we'll actually be playing, or I'll be playing on this channel. So for this section of the video, we're largely switching over to Bethesda Game Studios. The first section was kind of a mix of Bethesda Softworks and Bethesda Game Studios, but now specifically I'm pretty much only talking about Bethesda Game Studios unless I specify otherwise. So one thing not many other YouTubers or press outlets actually talked about that I think may be fairly likely is a remaster of an older Elder Scrolls game or an older Fallout game. The obvious choices in this category are Fallout 3 and New Vegas, which I think are the most likely, but also of course you do have Morrowind as well as Oblivion. The reason I think this could be fairly likely is they have a number of factors going for them in this category. Just as a hypothetical, let's actually look at Fallout 3. Fallout 3 is not widely available on Xbox One, there's some backwards compatibility things, but I imagine if a new Fallout 3 with some remaster did come out with mod support on Xbox One and I guess PS4, a lot of people would buy it. Even beyond that, with the introduction of Creation Club, there's new and additional ways to actually monetize those old games. They can make a lot of money on this, and I think the reason for a remaster, specifically with some of these older Bethesda games, is modding, or really console modding. That's like Bethesda's trump card. They actually can bring modding to consoles and sell a ton of copies through that method, while other game companies really just have to rely on graphics because that's the only thing their remaster is doing. Now the reason this may be unlikely is, well, first and foremost, the only reason we got a remaster of Skyrim was apparently it was like a testing thing they were using internally. In addition, since Fallout 3 or New Vegas, the engine has undergone some pretty considerable improvements, and having to rebuild that game or make modifications to the old game's engine would take a pretty considerable amount of work. But again, this is something that I personally think could be occurring at E3. Obviously, I might be proven wrong by this, but I personally think for financial reasons, it could be fairly likely or something Bethesda is considering. And to kind of build off that remaster idea, I also think we may see some more news about Creation Club. I don't know necessarily why this would be at E3, considering it's not a huge release, but maybe they're just going to use that platform to kind of advertise Creation Club more. Without giving away too much, I know for a fact there are mod authors in Creation Club that made some pretty awesome things that had never been released, or even some of the cool things that were teased at last E3 when they announced Creation Club that never got released. More or less what I'm saying is, I know Bethesda has a few things done for Creation Club that for whatever reason haven't come out yet. Maybe they're trying to do a big rush of a ton of high quality content for E3 at the start of summer, hoping to drive a bunch of sales. Or maybe there's something else going on, I don't know, but it's just something to note, and that's kind of interesting. Alright, so now for the interesting part of this video though, we do have a new AAA game. And this specifically is going to be a new AAA game from Bethesda Game Studios. We know a few details about this. A few years ago, Todd Howard did say that Bethesda is working on 3 new games. Specifically AAA games, and specifically games bigger than anything they've done before, but also having their same ideals. What I take this to mean is open world mod support and probably an RPG of some sort. Those are the things you just associate with Bethesda Game Studios games, and if they kind of abandon any of those things, I think people would be very unhappy. Something that could fill this role is actually a bleeding edge AAA freemium game. There was a job listing posted a while ago trying to recruit someone for that described game. If you don't know, freemium is basically it's free to install and download, but at the same time, there's going to be a ton of microtransactions. Think of League of Legends or Fortnite. I could speculate all day and night about what that could be, but we have no facts outside of just that one job listing. Also, before you get super excited for a new Elder Scrolls game, they did announce they'll release 2 new games, 2 new AAA IPs before the Elder Scrolls 6. So even if they announce the Elder Scrolls 6 at this E3, unless they're going to release 2 games this holiday season, I don't think we're seeing the Elder Scrolls 6 anytime soon. And just to reinforce, this is specifically Bethesda Game Studios. What a lot of people took that 3 AAA games to mean is pre-production on the Elder Scrolls 6 has begun, but 2 other games are also going to be a work in progress, one probably getting announced at this E3. The next hypothetical that would be pretty exciting, especially for me, would be a Fallout spin-off. Think Fallout New Vegas, or the rumored but then definitely not coming out Fallout New Orleans. The reason a lot of us think this is fairly likely is this is another one where Bethesda would be leaving a lot of money on the table if they didn't post a new Fallout game for quite a while. Like, let's say they're actually not working on a new Fallout now and they're going to release 2 new AAA games and then the Elder Scrolls 6 before releasing the next Fallout. You're talking about 5 to 10 years in the future before another Fallout comes out, and that just doesn't seem like a good idea. Fallout 4 is Bethesda Game Studios' best-selling game, beating out Skyrim, and continues to probably generate them a ton of money through Creation Club. Not having a new iteration in that franchise for 5 to 10 years seems very silly and just like a bad financial decision. With that being said, whether or not that's going to be the next game they announce is totally unclear. It could be the one after this next one, but also before the next Elder Scrolls game. But either way, people definitely find that to be likely. They think a new Fallout spin-off could be announced at this E3. There's no leaks or anything to support that, but again, it makes quite a bit of financial sense. Then we also do have Starfield. There's actually a trademark filed for this game quite a while ago, and a lot of people suspect this is going to be the next open-world RPG by Bethesda Game Studios. Skyrim takes place in what is effectively a fantasy medieval times. Fallout 4 takes place in a near-future post-apocalypse. Starfield could potentially be a far future or something that is properly in space, but have a lot of the same characteristics of those other 2 franchises, and of course attract a whole new audience with the new theme, but kind of maintaining that old audience. This one we actually got a bunch of leaks for. It was said this was going to be announced at the previous E3, and it would feature things like jumping from planet to planet and have all the same open world characteristics that we know and love. I think if I had to put my money on one thing, this could be announced at this E3. There's just been a lot of rumors surrounding this one, more so than any of the other games or potential games on this list. And if I was a betting man, I would actually say Starfield will get an announcement this time around. And then finally, the one that I don't think is very likely at all is actually that Game of Thrones game that was teased a while ago. This was supposedly leaked earlier in the year. That Bethesda is working on a Game of Thrones game. Timing-wise, it actually kind of makes sense. The final season of Game of Thrones is coming out soon. Bethesda, the creators of Skyrim, would kind of make an interesting choice for a Game of Thrones game. You could definitely see why someone logically would reach out to them. But they actually did have an opportunity to make this in the past, and they turned it down. Bethesda tends to like to create their own stories and their own lore, and with Game of Thrones or using an existing IP like this, they would have to kind of forfeit a lot of those liberties. I wouldn't rule it out entirely, but I would put it in the very, very, very unlikely category. And of course, then there's the potential of something totally new and unheard of that no leak has covered, Bethesda hasn't teased, and that will simply be revealed at E3. I definitely think that's possible. A lot of these other ones are fairly far-fetched without having a ton of evidence, but obviously as E3 grows closer, we'll probably have more leaks or hypothetical leaks. And before I end the video, one other thing I do want to just note is I think it could be also kind of likely to see a Doom 2. Doom sold really well. It sold really well on the Switch and for VR also, and I imagine Bethesda paid attention to that. A lot of people like the game and the genre kind of created around itself because it's fairly untapped from other games in this market. But again, Doom 2 would be from Bethesda Softworks, not Bethesda Game Studios. And that's pretty much going to wrap it up for this video. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions on all the different topics I talked about in the comments down below, but specifically, what new AAA game do you think Bethesda will announce? And even beyond that, what do you think the likelihood of a remaster for any of the old Elder Scrolls or Fallout games is? I feel like I'm one of the sole voices actually saying that's potential, so if it does come out, I'll have a big F you to everyone else, and if it doesn't, I'll just kind of look like an idiot. Either way, again, as always, I thank you for watching. If you guys do want to see more content about stuff that's actually downloadable right now, my previous episode of Mods Weekly showed off a bunch of great mods for Fallout 4 on PC and Xbox One. But with that, I hope to see you guys all next time. Later.